I often tell people that are interested in learning how to make dough to start with pasta dough. And that's because pasta dough does not have yeast in it. So pasta dough is much more easy to learn than a pizza dough or a bread dough. So if you want to get into making doughs, the best step for you is start with pasta dough, then go to pizza dough, and then go to bread dough. Bread's kind of tricky, but it's still fun, and I'll make some videos on how to do that too. Now in a previous video, I showed you how to make fresh pasta dough using water, flour, and eggs. And if you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link to it up here. Today we're gonna do an even easier dough. It's a dough using 2 ingredients, just flour and water. Very, very simple. With this dough, you can make some great pasta shapes, and I'll walk you through it. My name's Chef Jeremy with Lineage Culinary, and today we're gonna make pasta dough. First thing you wanna do is sift your flour onto your board. Get into a nice tall pile, and you want to take your hand, make a bird's beak, and then put a well right in the center. You want to make sure that's big enough to put your water in. Now I'm going to dump my room temperature water into the center. Now I'm going to grab a fork, and I'm going to start to pull some of that flour from the bottom and start to stir it, and then start doing the same motion I did with an egg dough, just like I'm beating some eggs. And I'm going to continue to pull flour from the bottom, not the top, from the bottom, and keep whipping my dough. And as you pull more flour in, it'll start to thicken a little bit, but you want to keep doing that so you get a nice silky smooth dough in the center. Now I've got 200 grams of flour here, and I like to do a 50% hydration dough, so that's 100 grams of room temperature water. Some people will say you should do 49, some say 52. I just do 50 because I think it's easy to remember. The flour I have here, this is Semolina flour. This is Caputo brand 00 Semolina flour, but really you can use any Semolina flour. I just like Caputo. I think they make a great brand of flour. Now that I'm starting to get a shaggy mess here, I'm going to start to chop my flour in. I'm going to get rid of my fork. And I'm just going to start to push all this together and start chopping my dough in together with my dough knife. Now I'm going to keep using my knife to chop that dough in, and then I'm going to switch to my hands and just start pushing it together. Now, once my dough is formed enough, I'm going to start kneading it. And you can see I'm pushing over, pulling over, and then pushing forward, over and forward. You want to keep doing this same motion. The same motion over and over. And what you're doing here is you're pushing those gluten strands so that they're all starting to align in the same direction. So that's going to help form our gluten network. And after I've been kneading for about 5 minutes, I'm going to look at my dough and see how it's kind of got those pock marks on there. I know it's a little too dry. I'm going to wet my hands a little bit and then just start working that water in there again. I'll wet my hands a little bit more and then back to that same motion. Over and forward, over and forward. And I'm going to keep doing this. Now, if I get it too wet, I can always do the opposite, add a little flour to my hands and work that back in. But you keep doing it until you get your dough into a nice, smooth texture, which is what you can see here. Now I'm going to wrap my dough, let it set out for 20 minutes at room temperature. Okay, now our dough has rested for 20 minutes and it's ready to shape. And I'm going to show you a few different pasta shapes that you can make with this dough. It's a very versatile dough. I'm going to unwrap my pasta dough and cut it into 4 pieces with my bench scraper. Then I'm going to rewrap the pieces that I'm not using so that they don't dry out. Now for our first shapes, we're not even going to use a rolling pin. We're just going to roll this out by hand into a nice long snake. Now the first pasta shape I'm going to show you is called trofie, and you can see it on the side there of the screen. First thing you want to do is you want to take your dough knife and cut off about a 1 centimeter piece of dough, and then taking your dough knife, you're going to want to kind of pull it and see how that pasta spins around. And then you just want to flatten the edges with your fingers. One more time. Use your dough knife. It'll curl around and then flatten it out. And you just want to repeat that process until you have all your pasta rolled out like that. You don't have to use a knife. You can just use your fingers if you wanted to, but I think the knife makes it a little bit easier. The next shape I'm going to do is called cavatelli. And you can see what I'm doing here is I'm just pushing the piece of dough down and letting it fold over with my thumb. And those end up looking like little upside down canoes, and that's called cavatelli. Now the next shape is called orecchiette, and that means little ears in Italian. And if you can see the shape I'm doing, it ends up looking like a little ear. So it's like cavatelli, you push it over, then you take your thumb and you shape that little ear shape out. Watch, I push across the board, and I use my thumb, and then there's my little ear. Now instead of pushing your thumb across the board like that, you could use a butter knife, and that gives it a nice texture that holds the sauce. But for the sake of this video, I'm just using my thumb. Another way you can make cavatelli is by using a gnocchi board, and that's what I have here in my hand. And it's that same motion of pushing the pasta across the board, but instead of pushing it on the cutting board, you're pushing it on that rigid gnocchi board, and it gives the pasta that nice rigid texture on the outside, which really helps hold the sauce. So this is a type of pasta I really like to make. Those boards are very inexpensive, and you can find them easily on Amazon. If you'd like to roll your dough, I'll show you another type of pasta you can make. Now I did a detailed video on how to roll out pasta dough, so I'm not going to go too in depth here, but if you'd like to see that video, I'll put a link up in the screen. So go ahead and roll your dough out so it's nice and thin. Now cut your dough into strips about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch wide. This is a shape called strozzapreti, which means priest choker in Italian. It's kind of like trofie, but you see you're taking those strips of pasta and rolling those up and then breaking off the edges there. The story goes that the church took away the eggs from the people of Emilia-Romagna, and so when the women made pasta for the priests, they named it strozzapreti because they hoped they would choke on the eggless pasta. Kind of harsh story, but the Italians take their pasta seriously. And that's how to make pasta dough. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. Please leave us a comment. Let us know what other types of things you'd like to learn about when it comes to the kitchen and what recipes you'd like to learn. I hope it was helpful. My name's Chef Jeremy with Lineage Culinary. Thank you for watching.